Analytics are great, but don't let them be the foundation on which you play fantasy football. They're best utilized as a peripheral tool only.
Tyler Boyd's dip in production last year better correlates with Andy Dalton being off the field than it does with A.J. Green being off the field, despite public perception.
You can't watch just highlight film because highlight film only shows the good things. Watch the player's actual game tape because you see the good and the bad.
In 7 games in 2018, where all 3 starting Rams receivers were healthy, Brandon Cooks led the trio in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and total PPR points by a considerable margin.
Is President of the United States in my range of outcomes? Welcome into RotoBros presents Mind of McConnell. You are in the mind of McConnell. And the question I'm asking is, if President of the United States is in my range of outcomes, is it possible that I could become President of the United States? Or was it possible, this is a better way to frame the question, was it possible when I was, let's say, 18? When I was 18, was President of the United States in my range of outcomes? The reason I ask is because we were having a pretty intense debate this morning in the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge. For those of you who don't know, check out the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge. It is we cover everything fantasy related: football, baseball, basketball. We cover season long. We cover DFS. We cover best ball. We even have a channel within our Discord server for the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge dedicated to beer and just everyday normal talk, whatever you want to talk about. Nothing's off limits in that channel. So it's a really cool place to hang out all day long, kill some time. You're on lunch at work. Kill some time in there on your lunch break, or kill some time while you're working. Who knows? Whatever you decide to do. But it's a great place. Go and check it out. Go to patreon.com/RotoBros. And you can choose the silver membership for $2, the gold membership for $5. And the gold membership, they're both great. Trust me. Both of them will get you access into the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge, access into all this great stuff. And a lot of great fantasy advice and everything, throughout the fantasy season as well. But even when it's not football season, like right now, you're still going to get a lot of great stuff. But anyway, go there, check it out, choose which package you want. And if you do not like it, if you don't like it, I will refund your money myself. That is a promise. And I'm not going to put my name on anything that I don't honor. So you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. However, we were having a discussion today in the Fantasy Lounge, and we were discussing ranges of outcomes. An analytic that has become widely popular, mainly in DFS and best ball communities. But there are some, like my beloved partner Mark, who was no doubt rolling his eyes. No doubt rolling his eyes at the opening question of this show. There are some, like my beloved partner Mark, who like to use these sorts of analytics for traditional season-long leagues. And I have obviously been outspoken that playing DFS and best ball the same way you play traditional season long is more often than not a bad idea. And I have laid out why it is a bad idea in numerous episodes. But I'm sure I will continue to have to do so moving forward. But anyway, that's just everybody has their own strategy, and Mark's is that, and mine is not. And it seems to work for both of us. So there's really no right or wrong. You just have your strategy. You find out what works best for you. You go with it. Whatever. More power to you. But anyway, we were having this discussion about range of outcomes, and I figured out that there are layers to this, and I'm actually thinking about it. And I did concede to a point I did concede to a point that I actually use a variation of range of outcomes. When we talk about a player's floor, a player's consistency week to week, that is, and thanks to to producer man, Joe Pollock, for allowing me to see the light on that. I will concede that point. I do use a variation of range of outcomes in my analysis, and that's fine. You should have everything you can at your disposal. Okay? Because it is a range of outcomes. But then I'm thinking about it on my drive home, and my drive home is over an hour. I have a pretty mean commute, and so I have a lot of time to think and commiserate and deliberate and figure out what is going on in the mind of McConnell. So let me explain to you what was going on the drive home today after this debate. So I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? There are layers to this. And I figured out which layers that I don't think some in the analytics community use to the best of their ability. And I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but I will give some examples here. Okay? But there are, like I said, there are some levels of range of outcomes that some of which you don't seem to, people don't seem to look into. And that's where my issue with the general range of outcomes comes into play. All right? So we go back to the original question. At 18 years old, is President of the United States in my range of outcomes? If we were having a societal draft, well, I don't know. I don't know the best name for it, but we're going to call it the societal draft. Okay? You got to go with me here. I'm going right off the top of my head. Let's say we're having a societal draft. All right? And it's the 6th round, and now we know I'm going to be a second-round pick at worst in the societal draft. I mean, come on. You guys know, right? Right? I mean, but let's say, just for argument's sake, it's in the 6th round, and I'm sitting there in the 6th round. And you're thinking to yourself, man, I mean, this guy's range of outcomes is President of the United States. But it's also a completely different occupation. But you're having to choose between me and another person, another player in this societal draft. Okay? And that other person, let's say, also 18 years old, same age. Okay? But let's say this person grew up with parents and family in the political realm, in the political arena. They've lived the political life, growing up into it, seeing how it works. And let's say that their draft profile is different from my draft profile in the sense that they didn't really go to school for political science, whereas maybe I did. Okay? Now, while they have more connections and know more people and know the system a little better and know how it works a little better, and I don't, but yet I have the education credentials from an academia standpoint, whose range of outcomes has a higher probability to be president of the United States one day? Is it in my range of outcomes? I would say so. But whose is more probable? Because that is what the argument is, right? Like, we're trying to find the probability between two people who has the higher probability to reach the higher range of outcome. Or the higher, more positive outcome in a range of outcome, we'll say. Right? We're trying to find the player that has the higher probability to reach RB1, wide receiver 1, QB1, yada, yada, yada. Okay? So when someone says, oh, it's in his range of outcomes, well, yeah, of course it is. Javonte Williams' range of outcomes is RB1. He's got RB1 in his range of outcomes, but he also has RB45 in his range of outcomes. So we're trying to find the probability. Well, what's the probability? Where are you going to measure the probability on that? If Javonte Williams, and that's the thing with like it's going to change all the time. Melvin Gordon could suffer a knee injury tomorrow, and Javonte Williams is the clear-cut starter in Denver. Clear-cut. Yeah, he may concede a little bit of touches to Mike Boone, but he's a clear-cut starter. He's going to be the workhorse more than likely. So now his range of outcomes to RB1 is considerably higher. And of course, you got to change with the time. You got to change with what happens, of course. But I shouldn't really use Javonte Williams as the main example here for a player. One that I want to use is the one where this whole range of outcomes thing became more of a popular topic within our season-long channel. Because apparently this thing has lived and breathed in DFS for a long time. But in the season-long channel, where it first really sort of manifested, was the debate surrounding Kyle Pitts. And there are those of us that think Kyle Pitts is on a completely different level than everybody else as far as tight ends go. And then there are some that think his range of outcomes isn't much different from anybody else. And they're comparing the range of outcomes to really any other tight end. And that's one problem for me. And that's another level, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's just sort of rewind. Let's pretend that Julio has not been traded yet. Okay? Because we have to, because this is where the debate started around Kyle Pitts' range of outcomes, and this is where the example starts. So this is pre-Julio trade, right? So you got Julio, you got Kyle Pitts, you got Calvin Ridley, right? Hayden Hurst is there. So Kyle Pitts, obviously his probability to finish as an even better fantasy player, you would think, logic would tell you, it would go up post-Julio trade, right? Okay. So you adjust his range of outcomes accordingly. But pre-Julio draft, there were some of us that were arguing that Kyle Pitts' range wasn't really any different, and it was still a lot better than the range of outcomes for other tight ends. But when this debate was going on, this is the problem that I had with it. The fact that we are comparing a range of outcomes for Kyle Pitts, because he's a tight end, we're comparing it position to position. And at the very least, the way that the argument was presented was that nothing else matters except range of outcomes in a general sense, blanket statement, all tight ends, same range of outcomes. He's a tight end, so his range of outcomes is the same of that of Brevin Jordan, let's say. Tight end for Miami, in Houston now. But my argument is that there are levels to that. The first level is the odds of that outcome being reached, and you have to look in it. You can't just say, oh, Kyle Pitts and Brevin Jordan are both tight ends, so the range of outcomes for both players is essentially the same. And you can't just look at the range of outcomes for Kyle Pitts and say, well, due to his position, his range of outcomes, it's very unlikely that he ever hits his expectation of top 3 tight end in the NFL. But is it really different than Brevin Jordan? And I would say yes. And of course, I'm just using Brevin Jordan as an example. Okay. The odds, and I would argue that the odds of that outcome being reached for Kyle Pitts is significantly different than the odds of it being reached for Brevin Jordan. And there may be some people that are listening that are like, and maybe even Mark, that are like, oh, well, of course, duh. But my problem is, why is it not being presented that way? Instead, it is presented as this blanket statement that makes it seem that all tight ends have the same range of outcomes. And that is where the entire discussion around this Kyle Pitts range of outcomes even started after the draft. And the second level is taking into account specific areas within that player's profile that could dictate the odds of that outcome being reached. Not just the odds in totality, but specific areas within that player's profile. Kyle Pitts, first level, Kyle Pitts is the greatest tight end prospect we've ever seen. I don't know if there's a debate about that. Like, that there shouldn't be. We've never seen anybody like him. Ever. He is Calvin Johnson playing tight end. We've never seen that. Everybody wants to go back to Vernon Davis. He's a better tight end prospect than Vernon Davis. When you actually compare, he's a better tight end prospect than Vernon Davis ever was. So my argument is not only that, but the fact that he is going to be playing more wide receiver in a way than a guy like Brevin Jordan would be. So you can't look at those two players' range of outcomes and even compare them and say, oh, his range of outcomes, his odds of hitting tight end one were the same of that, were the same of that TJ Hawkinson coming out. And TJ Hawkinson was a great prospect. One of my favorite tight end prospects ever. But not only, they're two different types of tight ends. TJ Hawkinson is going to play the majority of his snaps in line. Kyle Pitts probably is not, at least in his rookie season. So my argument is you have to look at that, number one. And again, the second level is taking into account specific areas within that player's profile that could dictate those odds. What offense are they playing on? What are the surroundings around that player? What are the specifics around that player's profile? That's when we can start getting into even more analytics. The athleticism, the speed, the overall talent, the film. Is he a better, in all those, is he a better prospect than, we'll say, Brevin Jordan? Or even Pat Freiermuth, who I also love. I think Pat's an animal. But that's why I think when you're talking about a range of outcomes, you can't just use the blanket statement. Or you can't use it as a blanket for all tight ends. And speak about range of outcomes, especially for a player like Kyle Pitts, as if it applies to everybody else in that position the same exact way. And if that's not how it was meant to be presented, that's how it was presented. And that's why there was a debate to begin with. And comparing the range of outcomes for all tight ends is a bad process. And again, you can't use the same process for range of outcomes for Brevin Jordan that you could use for Kyle Pitts. And again, that's just an example. Kyle Pitts is a vastly superior prospect than someone like Brevin Jordan. So because they play tight end, just because they play tight end the same position does not mean that their range of outcomes is the same. Because Kyle Pitts is so much better, his probability of reaching the optimum outcome of being a tight end 1, tight end 2, tight end 3 in his first 2 years is greater. The odds of that are greater. And for me, the main piece of the range of outcomes that I really don't like and that I'm quite frankly sick of hearing about is when someone sounds like they're hedging their bets. Like, again, he has RB1 in his range of outcomes, but he also has RB45 in his range of outcomes. Like, Kyle Pitts could be tight end 3 this year, but he could also be tight end 26. And then we talk about like the probability of which outcome is most likely. And I get that. We have to talk about the probability. But again, there's layers to it that affect that probability. And judging by another conversation we had in the fantasy lounge this evening, it looks like the next player that we're going to be talking about range of outcomes is Nico Collins. So we'll see how that ends up unfolding. But that's I just kind of wanted to expand on that for people. And for those of you that have never heard of range of outcomes, I apologize. You'll learn a little bit more about it, I guess, in the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge. So again, join us and check that out. And like I said, I'll concede to the point that I do, when it's all said and done, when it all boils down to, I use a form of range of outcomes. When it comes to high ceiling, low ceiling, and weekly consistency. I concede that point altogether, completely. And for me, when I say you shouldn't be playing DFS, or you should be playing traditional season long like DFS and best ball, here's a perfect example of what I mean. A perfect example. Henry Ruggs, you should not be drafting him in traditional season long. You just shouldn't. If he's going to be used, if he is going to be used the way that he was used last year, he's not a guy that you want to waste your time with. He may give you 3 or 4, maybe 5 spike weeks. Right? Like, maybe. And with Derek Carr and that, probably not. Deshaun Jackson, even with Matthew Stafford, like, he may give you some spike weeks, but this is not a guy that you want to trust and insert in your lineup and try to guess which week, because traditional season long, you're doing this weekly. Like, you're setting your lineup manually every single week. So you would have to then say, man, is this going to be the week that Henry Ruggs, goes for 4 catches for 120 yards and 2 scores? Like, that's too volatile. Like, the odds of that happening and the odds of you choosing to put him in your lineup on that specific week that he blows up are low. And that is what I don't like. That's the consistency, the inconsistency that I am not interested in. But in DFS and best ball, that's what I mean. Those are the types of guys that can win you the week. Those are week winners. So it's different. They're 2 different games. And that's why I say that is the one of the biggest examples that I like to use when you try to use DFS logic and best ball for traditional season long. It's just a different game. No matter how anybody wants to tell you that it's not. It is a different game and there's a different strategy involved. Yes, there are pieces that you can use. You can take strategy from season long and use in DFS and best ball and vice versa. Of course there is. We're all playing Monopoly. It's not like, traditional season long is Monopoly and DFS best ball is Clue. It's not completely opposite games. They're just different forms of Monopoly. So there's going to be different versions of Monopoly. So there's going to be different strategies. So you don't want to play them the same. So a player's range of outcomes week to week in traditional, that's like, sure, I'm looking at that. Absolutely. So that in that sense, I will concede, yeah, there's a variation of range of outcomes that we are all using every week when we set our lineups. That I will 100% agree with. But again, my issue with ROO, or range of outcomes, is when it's just used as a blanket statement, like, or it's presented as it, even if you don't mean to, like, it is presented as if it's being used in the same way for every player at that position. Is Javonte Williams' range of outcomes just as high as Travis Etienne's? Well, why wouldn't it be? We've already agreed that most of us believe that Melvin Gordon is on his last leg. Pun fully intended. And it's not going to be long until Javonte Williams is likely the guy in that backfield. I think I've been on record. I've been saying week 10, 9, 10. He should be the top dog in that backfield. And if he isn't, he's the workhorse in that backfield. Why is his range of outcomes not the same as Travis? Why am I being told that Travis's range of outcomes is higher? How? I mean, how? Unless Melvin Gordon has a resurrection season and proves that he's not about to be dust, and Javonte Williams absolutely stinks, and James Robinson proves to be a mirage, like, I'm being told that Travis Etienne's range of outcome is significantly higher than Javonte. Like, how? Explain to me, like I'm 5. I would argue Javonte Williams has a better chance this year to be the do-it-all workhorse than Travis Etienne. Now, and look, I've been on record. I love both guys. Love both. But I'm just saying, there is absolutely a chance that Javonte Williams finishes and is a more productive running back than Travis Etienne. And his college production would seem to point to that. What he did with what he had to work with, it has to be contextualized. It has to be contextualized. Look how productive he was, even splitting time with Michael Carter. That's not a knock on Javonte. That makes it even more impressive. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to unpack that and talk about the whole range of outcomes and sort of elaborate more on where I'm coming from with that. And of course, concede to the fact, because I'm a fair individual, concede to the fact that we're all using a piece of range of outcomes every single week. But at the same time, we can't use it as a blanket analytic, so to speak. We can't say, oh, Kyle Pitts is a tight end, so his range of outcomes does not look as good, even with Julio there, because he's going to be playing tight end. He's going to be a tight end in name only. Again, the guy's going to be split out wide. If anything, you could argue that might be a good thing for him if Julio was still there. You could argue both ways. Because who is going to put constant double coverage on Kyle Pitts and leave Calvin and Julio wide open? Right? Like, who's more who is more likely to receive the double teams in the bracket coverage? Probably going to be Julio, right? And now Julio's gone, and the range of outcomes goes up, and his probability of ending the season as a top 3 goes up because Julio's gone. And I agree with that. I do. But again, using it as a blanket statement and trying to compare, putting all tight ends in the same range of outcome and using the same blanket for everybody at the position the same way, I just think is dangerous. And if that's not what is being done, then so be it. But it just needs to be explained better. It needs to be presented better, is all I'm saying. And that doesn't go for Mark or anybody else that use. That goes for everybody. We need to make sure that we are breaking it down specifically, and we are looking at more than just, oh, he's a tight end. So the odds of him being tight end 1 or tight end 3 go down. It's just his range of outcomes is low. We have to take into account this guy is unlike any other tight end to ever come out. So that in and of itself should raise his range of outcomes above every other tight end that we've seen lately, especially this draft. And that's really the main point that I wanted to get to. And to answer the burning question, yes, President of the United States is absolutely in my range of outcomes. McConnell 2034, baby. Guys, thanks for hanging out for a little bit. Listen, again, if you are not a member of the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge, check it out. Go to patreon.com/RotoBros. And you can join us for all the fun in there. We have a lot of great debates. Mark and I go at each other. Even Producer Man jumped in today. We have a lot of fun in there. And you guys may read these debates and you may say, man, these guys hate each other. We don't. We all love each other. We get irritated every once in a while, but we love each other. We love each other. But everybody loves the debates. And it's the thing about what you have to take from these debates, guys, is the fact that there's a lot of great information. And there are arguments on both sides that you can take and really sort of form your own analysis from, and take away your own you can take away your own analysis from. But there's so much information that you're going to get from everybody, even if it's not me and Mark. There's so many great people in this, a great community. So please check that out. Go to patreon.com/RotoBros. It's going to be popping here in the next, couple months. It already is all day long, but I mean, we're gonna shift it into sport mode here coming up when football season officially kicks off. But it's always football season in the RotoBros Fantasy Lounge. So definitely check that out, guys. Thanks for hanging out. And by the way, just so everybody knows, Kyle Pitts, tight end 5.